The coffee mug hit the kitchen tile so hard, it sounded like a gunshot. For one strange second, nobody moved. Not my father standing beside the sink, not my sister frozen halfway into her chair, not even me. Hot coffee spread across the yellowed linoleum floor in slow, dark rivers, while shards of ceramic slid under the table legs. My mother just stood there, staring at the papers slipping from her hands, like she didn't recognize the words anymore. Outside, cicadas screamed in the Tennessee heat. Inside that kitchen, you could have heard somebody blink. My mother whispered, "Rachel." That was all she got out. I leaned back in Grandpa Walter's old chair and folded my arms. Calm. Too calm, honestly. Years in the Army had trained that into me so deep, I wasn't sure I could turn it off anymore. "I told y'all," I said quietly. "Don't push me tonight." Nobody answered. The old refrigerator hummed beside the pantry. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked twice. Dana finally bent down to pick up a piece of the broken mug, mostly so she didn't have to look at me. That was the moment I realized my family had spent most of my life mistaking silence for weakness, and they were finally figuring out the difference. This all started 3 days after I got back from Kuwait. Fort Campbell processed me fast because I'd been overseas nearly 9 months running logistics support. Long nights, dust storms, supply convoys, sleep when you could get it. The kind of deployment where your body comes home before the rest of you does. By the time I crossed into Tennessee, the humidity felt like somebody draped a wet blanket over my face. Clarksville looked exactly the same, though. Same billboards, same pawn shops, same little Baptist churches every few miles, same Cracker Barrel off the interstate, where retirees drank coffee at 6 in the morning like it was a competitive sport. I drove Grandpa's old brick ranch house, expecting peace and quiet. Instead, I found a silver BMW parked crooked in the driveway. Dana's. I remember sitting there, gripping the steering wheel, thinking, no, absolutely not. The front porch still had Grandpa's wind chimes hanging beside the faded American flag he refused to replace because he said worn flags had earned the right to look tired. But through the living room window, I could see women's clothes thrown over the couch. I walked inside and immediately smelled cigarette smoke covered with vanilla candles. That combination right there, that was Dana in a nutshell, trying to make bad decisions smell expensive. "Hello?" I called. My older sister appeared from the hallway wearing silk pajama pants and one of those oversized sweaters women buy when they want to look casually wealthy. "Rachel," she said, like this was completely normal. "You're home early." "Home early?" I laughed once, short, sharp. "What are you doing in my house?" Her smile flickered. "It's temporary." "Temporary since when?" Dana crossed her arms. "Travis and I broke up." "Uh-huh. And Mom said—" I didn't ask what Mom said. That landed harder than I intended. Dana looked exhausted under all the makeup, puffy eyes, nervous hands. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I noticed 2 maxed-out credit card bills sitting open on my kitchen counter. My kitchen. Grandpa left me this house 6 months earlier, after he died from pancreatic cancer. Small ranch place outside Clarksville. Nothing fancy, but it was paid off. Solid bones, big backyard, workshop garage, tomato garden. Grandpa loved more than most people. Dana got the money instead. Almost $200,000 between investments and savings. Gone in less than 2 years. Boutique business downtown, designer furniture, weekend trips to Nashville, helping Travis launch a business, shopping when she got depressed, shopping when she got happy too. Dana spent money like emotions came with receipts. That first night home, I barely unpacked before my parents invited themselves over for Sunday dinner, which really meant intervention. My mother fried chicken like she always did when she wanted people emotionally soft. The old air conditioner rattled above the sink, trying its best against the July heat. Sweet tea sweated in cloudy glasses, while Dana sat at the table, pretending she hadn't moved herself into my house without permission. I mostly listened. That's what I'd always done in this family. Dad cleared his throat halfway through dinner. "Rachel," he said carefully, "your sister's having a rough patch." I kept eating. "She just needs stability right now," Mom added quickly. Dana stared into her plate like a child waiting for adults to negotiate custody. Then Dad finally said it. "The army takes care of you, honey. Dana only has family left." I stopped chewing. Not dramatic, not angry, just stopped. And suddenly, I was back overseas, hearing mortar alarms at 2 a.m, backloading supply trucks while sand scraped against my goggles, back watching 19-year-old kids shake after their first attack because they were trying so hard not to look scared. The army took care of me. That was funny. I set my fork down carefully. "You think the government owns me now?" I asked. Dad sighed. "That's not what I meant." "No," I said. "That's exactly what you meant." Mom jumped in fast. "Rachel, sweetheart, nobody is attacking you." I almost laughed again. Nobody in this family ever thought emotional betrayal counted as violence. Dana finally spoke. "I just need somewhere to land for a while." "You had $200,000, I said. Her face hardened immediately. "There it is." "There what is?" "You always do this," she snapped. "You act like you're better than everybody because you joined the military." That one stung because there was enough truth inside it to hurt. I had judged her, a lot. But I also buried Grandpa while she was in Nashville buying furniture she couldn't afford. Dad rubbed his forehead. "Can we not fight?" Fight? Like I'd started this. I stood up slowly and walked into the hallway closet where I'd left my deployment bag. Then I came back carrying a manila envelope. Nobody spoke while I slid it across the table. Mom opened it first. I watched her face drain of color as she flipped through the documents. Grandpa's amended will, the notarized statement, copies of forged property authorization forms. Then came the coffee mug. Crash! Coffee splashed across Dad's boots while Mom stared at the signature page, trembling so hard I thought she might faint. Dana whispered, "Where did you get this?" I looked directly at her. Grandpa left it for me. The room went dead silent. Then I said the thing I should have said years earlier. I stayed quiet for 8 years. I glanced at the papers shaking in my mother's hands. But Grandpa doesn't want me quiet anymore. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of the argument. Honestly, growing up in my family trained me to function around tension, the same way some people learn to sleep through thunderstorms. It was the silence afterward that got to me. Mom and Dad left right after dinner, without cleaning up the broken coffee mug. That alone told me how shaken they were. My mother would normally scrub blood off a floor before bed if she had to. Dana disappeared into the guest room and slammed the door hard enough to rattle Grandpa's old hallway pictures. Then the house just settled. Old houses do that at night. Pipes ticking, floorboards creaking, the hum of window units fighting southern heat. I sat alone at the kitchen table around 1 a.m, staring at the envelope I'd finally opened after 6 months of avoiding it myself. People think revenge feels exciting. It doesn't. Mostly, it feels exhausting. There was still coffee staining the grout lines between the tiles. I should have cleaned it up, but I couldn't stop thinking about my mother's face when she saw Grandpa's notarized statement. Like part of her already knew. That was the thing nobody understood about families like mine. The lies weren't usually hidden. They just became furniture after a while. Everybody learned to walk around them. I finally stood up and grabbed paper towels. While I was wiping the floor, I heard the guest room door open behind me. Dana shuffled into the kitchen, wearing one of Grandpa's old flannel shirts over leggings. She looked smaller without makeup, older too. For a minute, neither of us said anything. Then she opened the refrigerator. "You still buy that disgusting military peanut butter?" she asked quietly. I almost smiled, despite myself. "Protein. That tastes like drywall." "There she is," I muttered. Dana grabbed bottled water and leaned against the counter. "You really blindsided Mom tonight." I kept scrubbing at the grout. "You moved into my house." "Temporary. You keep saying that word like it means something." She sighed hard through her nose. "I had nowhere else to go." I stood up slowly. "You had money, Dana." Her jaw tightened immediately. "Not everybody gets to disappear into the army every time life gets hard." That one landed because she wasn't entirely wrong. I'd spent 20 years volunteering for deployments, transfers, extra assignments. Iraq, Kuwait, Germany, Texas. Anywhere but Tennessee. Anywhere but this family. "You think I ran away?" I asked. "I think you left me here alone with them." That surprised me enough I didn't answer right away. Dana stared down at the kitchen floor. "You got to become somebody," she said softly. "I stayed here becoming everybody's disappointment." Then she walked back down the hallway before I could figure out what to say to that. I didn't sleep after that either. Around 4:30 in the morning, I drove to Walmart because my body was still on Middle East time. Clarksville Walmart before sunrise is its own little universe. Retirees buying bananas, construction workers grabbing energy drinks, tired mothers steering carts one-handed. Normal people living normal lives. I envied them. On the drive home, I passed the diner Grandpa used to love off Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. Miss Carla was outside smoking beside the dumpster when she spotted my truck. That woman could detect family drama from 3 counties away. "Well," she called out, "you picked one hell of a week to come home." I stopped walking. Here we go. She took another drag from her cigarette. "Your mama says Dana's struggling." "My mama says a lot of things." Miss Carla studied me carefully. "She also says you're threatening to throw your sister out." There it was. Small-town Tennessee, news traveled faster than weather. I gave her a tired smile. "You know Grandpa left me that house. People also know your sister's hurting." I laughed quietly. Funny how nobody ever asked whether I was hurting too. Miss Carla softened a little. "For what it's worth, she said your granddaddy worshipped you." That almost hurt worse, because Grandpa loving me had always cost something inside this family. By the time I got back home, Dana was asleep on the couch with the television still on. Some home renovation show played softly in the background, while sunlight crept across the living room floor. She looked peaceful for once, and suddenly I remembered being 8 years old, hiding behind Grandpa's truck, while Dana taught me how to throw a softball. Before money, before lies, before our family slowly turned her into somebody nobody could rescue anymore. That memory stayed with me while I cleaned out Grandpa's garage later that afternoon. The garage still smelled like motor oil, sawdust, and peppermint gum. Grandpa chewed peppermint gum constantly after chemo ruined his taste buds. His old fishing rod still leaned in the corner beside rusted toolboxes, half-finished birdhouse on the workbench, army photo of me taped near his radio. I almost left everything untouched. Then I noticed fresh insulation disturbed near the attic crawlspace. I dragged over a ladder. Inside the crawlspace sat a small, black, fireproof lockbox wrapped in an old army blanket Grandpa used during winters. My stomach dropped immediately. I knew that blanket. Grandpa only stored important things in military gear because he said soldiers respected responsibility more than civilians did. The key was taped underneath the box, like he expected me to find it eventually. Inside were 3 folders. The first held unpaid loan notices addressed to Dana. The second contained copies of repayment checks Grandpa had quietly written over the years. $30,000 here, $8,000 there, credit card bailouts, medical bills, missed car payments. My chest tightened reading through them. Grandpa had been helping her far longer than I knew. Then I opened the 3rd folder, and that's when things stopped feeling sad and started feeling dangerous. Inside sat forged power of attorney paperwork, my name typed across legal forms, fake signatures, bank authorization drafts, property transfer paperwork connected to Grandpa's house. Dana hadn't just wanted a place to stay. She'd been preparing to take the house. I sat there on the garage floor for a long time, staring at those papers while sweat rolled down my back in the Tennessee heat. Part of me still wanted to believe there had to be some explanation. Then I found the USB drive taped beneath the folder and Grandpa's note. His handwriting shook from cancer treatments, but I recognized every crooked letter instantly. If you found this, then Dana finally ran out of people to rescue her. I don't know how long I sat there before plugging the USB into Grandpa's old garage laptop. The audio crackled first. Then came his breathing, weak, thin, painfully tired. Rachel? Just hearing his voice again knocked the air out of me. I covered my mouth immediately. There was a long pause before he spoke again. Your parents think protecting Dana is love. Another pause, labored breathing. But if nobody lets her fall, she's gonna drag everybody down with her. I shut my eyes. Outside, cicadas buzzed so loud it sounded electrical. Then Grandpa said the thing that finally broke me. You were never supposed to carry this family by yourself. I started crying right there on the garage floor. Not graceful crying either, the ugly kind. 40-year-old woman in army boots, sitting beside fishing gear and power tools, crying like a child because somebody finally admitted I'd been drowning too. And deep down, I think Grandpa knew nobody else ever would. By Wednesday morning, half of Montgomery County knew my family was at war. That's the thing about small southern towns. Nobody needs social media when they've got church parking lots and diner waitresses. I walked into Harper's Diner around 7 for coffee, and every conversation in the place dipped half a notch quieter. Not stopped completely, that would have been rude, just softened enough for me to notice. Miss Carla stood behind the register, pretending not to study me while pouring coffee into thick white mugs. 2 old men near the window glanced over at me, then quickly back at their pancakes. I'd seen this look before, overseas. People waiting to see whether somebody was about to explode. Miss Carla finally slid my coffee across the counter. You doing okay, sweetheart? I almost laughed. Nobody asks that question because they want the truth. I'm alive, I said. That ain't the same thing. Fair enough. I took my coffee to a booth near the window. Outside, Clarksville traffic crawled past in humid morning heat, while thunderclouds gathered low over the highway. I'd barely taken 2 sips before my phone buzzed. Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. Morning. Her voice sounded tired already. We're having dinner after church tonight. Why? A pause. Because this family needs healing. I stared out the window. No, Mom, this family needs honesty. Rachel, you invited people, didn't you? Another pause. That told me everything. Mom, it's just close family, which meant at least 20 people. I rubbed my forehead. You're turning this into a public trial. No, she snapped suddenly, emotion cracking through her voice. I'm trying to save this family before it breaks apart completely. Too late for that. I almost said it out loud. Instead, I asked, Did Dana tell you about the forged paperwork? Silence, long enough to matter. Then she made mistakes. I shut my eyes. Mistakes are overdrafting your checking account. Forging legal documents is a felony. My mother lowered her voice immediately. Don't say that word. Why? Because hearing it out loud makes it real? Because she's still your sister. There it was again, the rule that governed my family my entire life. Dana's pain mattered. Everybody else's pain was negotiable. Mom finally whispered, Please come tonight. Then she hung up before I could answer. I should have stayed home. Honestly, every instinct I developed in 20 years wearing a uniform told me walking into that church fellowship hall was a terrible idea. But families know exactly which guilt buttons to push, and mine had years of practice. By 6 o'clock that evening, I was standing outside First Baptist Community Church, staring at rows of pickup trucks and sedans filling the parking lot. The fellowship hall lights glowed warm against the darkening Tennessee sky. Inside, I could already hear dishes clattering and people talking too loudly. Church supper noise. I almost turned around. Then Uncle Roy's truck pulled in beside me. He climbed out slower than he used to. Vietnam had wrecked his knees years ago. Big man, weathered face, usually smelled faintly like motor oil and black coffee. He looked at me for a long second. You armed? I snorted despite myself. No. Emotionally? Also no. That got the closest thing to a smile Uncle Roy ever gave. Well, he muttered, guess we're both screwed then. Inside smelled exactly like every Southern church fellowship hall on earth. Coffee, gravy, lemon disinfectant, old carpet, and casseroles nobody seasoned enough. Round folding tables filled the room. Crock-pots lined the back counters beside trays of biscuits and banana pudding, and every single person stopped talking when I walked in. Not dramatically, just enough. Dana sat beside Mom, wearing a soft blue sweater like she was auditioning to play America's Saddest Daughter. Dad stood near the coffee urn, talking to Pastor Green. Then he spotted me. Rachel came, he announced, like I was a surprise guest at my own execution. I sat near the far end of the room, beside Uncle Roy. Miss Carla gave me a tiny, sympathetic nod while refilling sweet tea glasses nearby. The whole room buzzed with fake casualness, everybody pretending this wasn't exactly what it looked like. Finally, Pastor Green stood. Well, he said awkwardly, before dessert, maybe we ought to say a few things as a family. I nearly walked out right then. Dad spoke first. Folks know Rachel's been serving overseas a long time. Serving overseas. Interesting way to phrase never being home enough to matter. Dad clasped his hands together. And we're proud of her, we are. That but was hanging in the room before he even said it. But family's family, and Dana's been struggling. Dana dabbed carefully at her eyes with a napkin. Napkin. I stared at the table. Dad continued. Rachel's always been independent, tough. She left home young and built her own life. Left home. Not enlisted, not served, not sacrificed. Left, like I'd abandoned them. And Dana stayed here, he said quietly. She stayed close to family. I finally looked up. Dad, I said calmly. She stayed close because somebody was always paying her bills. The room went dead quiet. Mom immediately jumped in. Rachel, please. No, let her speak, Dana snapped suddenly. There she was, the real Dana finally surfacing. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes full of years of resentment. You want to know what everybody says about you? She asked. They say you come home acting like you're better than everybody because you escaped. Escaped. That word hit harder than I expected because part of me feared she was right. I thought about birthdays I missed, funerals, Thanksgivings, years passing in airports and barracks and temporary housing. Maybe I had escaped. The room blurred slightly around the edges. For the first time since coming home, I honestly considered giving her the house, just ending this whole thing. Then Uncle Roy leaned toward me quietly. Your granddaddy cried in my garage 3 years ago, he said under his breath. I turned toward him. He said this family kept handing you responsibility while handing Dana excuses. My throat tightened instantly. Uncle Roy stared straight ahead. He was ashamed of it. Before I could answer, the fellowship hall doors opened and Travis walked in. Every head in the room turned. Dana physically stiffened beside Mom. Travis looked rough, unshaven, tired, baseball cap pulled low. He carried a manila folder under one arm. I won't stay long, he said immediately. Nobody moved. Pastor Green looked deeply uncomfortable. Dana stood up fast. What are you doing here? Travis ignored her completely. Instead, he walked directly toward me. I figured you deserved the truth, he said quietly. Then he handed me the folder. Inside were bank statements, loan paperwork, signature comparisons. My stomach dropped. Dana had forged his name on a business loan 6 months earlier. $35,000. Oh my God, Mom whispered. Dana's face drained white. It wasn't like that. The hell it wasn't, Travis snapped. Years of anger cracked loose all at once. I emptied my retirement trying to save you, he said. Then you stole from me anyway. Nobody in the room spoke. You could hear the old fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Then Miss Carla quietly muttered from the back, Lord have mercy. And right there, in that fellowship hall, surrounded by casseroles and church people and folding chairs, I finally understood something. My sister wasn't drowning because nobody loved her. She was drowning because everybody kept dragging her back to shore before she learned how to swim on her own. And my parents expected me to keep doing it too. The storm rolled in Thursday evening just before sunset. You could smell it first, that heavy Tennessee air turning metallic and damp, wind pushing through the trees hard enough to shake Grandpa's porch swing against the siding. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching dark clouds gather over the backyard while thunder rumbled somewhere beyond the fields. Dana still wasn't home. After the church supper, she disappeared for nearly 24 hours. Mom called me 6 times asking if I'd heard from her. Dad left 2 voicemails pretending not to blame me while absolutely blaming me. Travis drove back to Nashville right after dropping the paperwork bomb in front of half the county, and me. I spent most of the day sitting in Grandpa's garage, listening to that recording over and over like some kind of punishment. Not because I enjoyed it, because hearing his voice felt like the only honest thing left in this whole mess. Around 6:30, headlights swept across the driveway, then another set, and another. I glanced through the front window. Mom and Dad, Uncle Roy, Dana, even Pastor Green's Buick. I sighed slowly. Apparently, nobody trusted this family to survive unsupervised anymore. A minute later, somebody knocked. Not aggressive, not polite either, just tired. I opened the door. Mom stepped inside first, clutching her purse with both hands. Dad followed, carrying tension around his shoulders like wet concrete. Dana came in last, wearing jeans and an oversized sweatshirt despite the heat. Her eyes looked swollen. She avoided looking at me completely. Nobody spoke for a few awkward seconds while thunder cracked outside. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Rachel," he said carefully, "your mother said you wanted us all here." I did. Why? I glanced toward the living room. Because I'm done having this conversation in pieces. The old house creaked around us while rain started hammering the roof. Uncle Roy quietly shut the front door behind him. Mom looked exhausted already. "Can't we just move forward?" she asked softly. I looked at her for a long moment. No. That hurt her. I could see it immediately. But sometimes the truth hurts because somebody should have said it years earlier. I walked over to Grandpa's old recliner, where I'd placed a small portable speaker and the USB drive from the lockbox. Dana noticed it instantly. Her entire body stiffened. "Rachel," she said sharply, "don't." I met her eyes for the first time all day. "You forged legal documents." I said I was sorry. "No," I replied calmly. "You said you were desperate." Dad stepped forward immediately. "Now, hold on." "No, Dad, you hold on." That surprised him enough to stop talking. I took a slow breath. You all spent years acting like Dana's choices just happened to her, like she was weather, like nobody could expect better from her. Mom's voice cracked. "She's your sister, and I'm your daughter." Silence. Rain battered the windows harder. Then I pressed play. Static crackled softly through the speaker. Dana moved instantly. "Turn that off." Grandpa's breathing filled the room before anybody could answer. Weak, uneven, fragile enough to break your heart. Mom covered her mouth immediately. Then Grandpa spoke. "Rachel." Just hearing his voice froze every person in that room. "I'm recording this because I know my family." A long coughing fit interrupted him. I shut my eyes briefly. Then his voice returned softer than before. "Your mama loves hard. Your daddy avoids hard things. And Dana," another pause. "Dana keeps waiting for somebody else to save her from herself." Dana suddenly lunged toward the speaker. "Turn it off!" She grabbed for the USB drive, but Uncle Roy caught her wrist before she reached it. "Easy," he growled. Dana jerked away from him instantly. "This is sick," she shouted at me. "You're humiliating me." "No," I said quietly. The truth is humiliating you. That landed. You could actually see it hit her. Mom started crying softly into her hands, while Grandpa's voice continued through the speaker. Rachel spent her whole life cleaning up messes nobody thanked her for. My throat tightened immediately. Outside, thunder cracked so loud the windows rattled. Then Grandpa said the sentence that changed the entire room. Being the strong one in a family can turn into another kind of prison. Nobody moved. Dad stared at the floor like somebody punched him in the chest. Pastor Green quietly removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Dana looked furious 1 second, then suddenly exhausted the next. Grandpa's voice weakened further. If you love somebody, you gotta stop protecting them from consequences eventually. The recording ended with soft static. That was it. No dramatic music, no final speech, just silence. Real silence. The kind that settles into people's bones. Dana laughed once, suddenly. Sharp, broken. Well, she muttered. Guess Grandpa figured me out. Mom immediately reached toward her. Honey. Number. Dana backed away. Mascara streaked beneath her eyes now. Then she looked directly at me. You really think you're better than me, don't you? I shook my head slowly. Number. Bullshit. You want to know the truth? She crossed her arms. Fine. I looked at her carefully because for once, I didn't want to say something cruel just because it was easy. I don't hate you, Dana. Her expression flickered. I'm just tired. My voice almost broke there. Tired of cleaning up disasters you create. Tired of being told my life matters less because I can survive hard things. Nobody spoke. 20 years of resentment sat in that room, breathing beside us. Then Dana said the ugliest thing she could think of. You think wearing that uniform made you special. And there it was, the wound underneath all of it. Not money, not the house, jealousy. I nodded once. You know what the Army taught me? Dana rolled her eyes. Please enlighten me. That surviving something doesn't make you stronger automatically. Even Dad looked up at that. It just means you survived. Rain pounded the roof so hard now it sounded almost violent. I continued quietly. And honestly, I got tired of surviving things you created. Dana stared at me for a long moment. Then something inside her seemed to collapse. Not dramatically, just quietly. She looked around the room at Mom crying, Dad ashamed, Uncle Roy exhausted, Pastor Green pretending not to witness a family implosion. Then she walked out the front door into the storm. Mom started after her immediately. I stopped her gently. Let her go. 20 minutes passed. Nobody said much. Dad finally sat at the kitchen table, looking older than I'd ever seen him. You should have told us sooner, he muttered. I laughed softly, without humor. You wouldn't have listened. Nobody argued with that. Then headlights swept across the driveway again. The front door opened. Dana stepped inside, soaked from head to toe, rain dripping from her sweatshirt sleeves. In her hand were Grandpa's Corvette keys. The little silver keychain, shaped like a fishhook, swung gently between her fingers. Without looking at anybody, she crossed the kitchen and dropped them onto the counter. Clink. I never even learned how to drive the damn thing, she whispered. And somehow, That hurt worse than all the screaming, because for the first time in years, my sister sounded honest. The first thing I did after Dana left was change the locks. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion. There's a difference. A week earlier, I probably would have felt guilty about it. I would have worried what Mom might think, or whether Dad would call me cold again. But after that night in the storm, something inside me finally settled into place. Not happiness, not victory either, just clarity. The locksmith came out on a humid Tuesday morning while I sat on the front porch drinking coffee from one of Grandpa's old army mugs. The guy was maybe 25, tattoos, sunburned neck, country music playing softly from his truck. He replaced every lock in under an hour. When he handed me the new keys, he nodded toward the house and asked, "Messy divorce?" I almost laughed. You have no idea. By August, the heat in Tennessee turned brutal. Thick air, cicadas screaming nonstop, grass growing faster than anybody wanted to mow it. I threw myself into fixing the house, mostly because staying busy felt safer than sitting still. Grandpa's place had always been sturdy, but worn down around the edges. The kitchen walls still carried faded flower wallpaper from the 90s. Cabinet doors hung crooked. The porch swing creaked like it was announcing somebody's arrival to the entire county. So I started repairing things, one room at a time, slowly, methodically, the way Army life taught me to handle chaos. One Saturday morning, I painted over the pale pink guest bedroom Dana had taken over while she stayed there. I replaced it with a soft gray-blue color that reminded me of early morning skies before base wake-up calls. Halfway through painting, Mom showed up unexpectedly, carrying an apple pie. Of course she did. Southern mothers will avoid direct emotional conversations until the day they die, but they'll show up with baked goods like hostage negotiators. She stood awkwardly in the doorway while I rolled paint onto the wall. "You changed the room," she said quietly. "Needed changing." Mom nodded slowly. The house smelled like fresh paint and pie crust. For a while, we just existed in the same space without speaking much. Then she surprised me. I listened to the recording again. I stopped rolling paint. Mom sat carefully on the edge of Grandpa's old recliner. "He was right about some things," she admitted softly. Some things? That was probably the closest my mother could get to a full confession. I leaned the paint roller against the tray. "Mom?" Her eyes filled immediately. "No," she whispered. "Just let me say this before I lose my nerve." I stayed quiet. She twisted her wedding ring around her finger the way she always did when anxious. When Dana was little, she cried over everything. Every scraped knee, every bad grade, every breakup. Mom gave a tired smile. "And you were always okay." I almost interrupted right there, but she kept going. "So we worried about her more, helped her more." Tears slid down her cheeks now. "And somewhere along the way, we just started expecting you to survive things alone." That hit me harder than any apology could have, because it was true. Not cruel exactly, just true. Mom looked around the room. "You know what your granddaddy used to tell me?" "What?" He said, "Rachel doesn't complain because she already decided nobody's coming." I looked away fast after that. Some sentences hit too close to old wounds. Mom stood slowly and walked toward the kitchen. "I brought pie," she said gently, like she needed something ordinary to hold on to. "It's peach this time. Store didn't have enough apples." Then she left before either of us could ruin the moment by talking too much. Dad took longer. That didn't surprise me either. Men his age were raised believing silence counted as emotional management. About 3 weeks later, I came home from Lowe's with lumber in the truck bed and found him repairing Grandpa's backyard fence, alone. No phone call, no warning, just there, in work gloves, tightening bolts like he belonged there. I climbed out slowly. Dad glanced over once. This section was leaning. That was his entire explanation. I grabbed the other end of the fence post without another word. We worked beside each other nearly 2 hours in humid silence, broken only by cicadas and hammer strikes. Finally, Dad said quietly, "I should have listened sooner." I kept tightening bolts. "Yes," I answered. He nodded once, and somehow that was enough. Not perfect, not healed, but honest. Dana called me for the first time in September. I almost didn't answer. She was living outside Nashville then, renting a tiny apartment behind a feed supply store where she worked part-time, handling invoices and inventory. She sounded tired. Different kind of tired, though, less frantic. "I'm going to meetings," she said suddenly. I leaned back in Grandpa's porch swing. "What kind of meetings?" "You know what kind." I waited. Then she laughed softly, without humor. "Turns out, when you spend your whole life getting rescued, you never learn how to be a person." That was probably the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard my sister say. We talked maybe 15 minutes. Nothing dramatic happened. No tearful reunion, no movie ending. Before hanging up, Dana asked quietly, "Do you think Grandpa hated me?" I looked out across the backyard toward his tomato garden. The plants were finally growing again. "No," I said honestly. "I think he got tired of watching everybody lie to you." She cried a little after that. So did I, once the call ended. Because the hardest part about loving damaged people is accepting that love alone doesn't fix them. Sometimes it just keeps them broken longer. October arrived cooler and quieter. One evening, I sat alone on Grandpa's porch, watching sunset settle across the fields while cicadas buzzed low in the distance. The porch swing creaked gently beneath me. In my lap sat Grandpa's handwritten letter from the lockbox. The paper felt softer now from how many times I'd unfolded it. For years, I thought being strong meant enduring everything silently. Military life reinforced that idea. So did my family. But Grandpa understood something before I did. Strength without boundaries eventually turns into self-destruction. I looked out across the yard he loved so much and finally whispered the truth out loud. I can love them without disappearing for them. And for the first time in a very long while, that felt like enough. If you've ever been the strong one in your family, you probably know how heavy that role can get. Sometimes helping people means carrying them for a while, and sometimes love looks more like stepping back and letting them stand on their own.